I stood at the doorstep of our vacation cabin, gripping the keys so hard they dug into my palm. The place Ethan and I built together, the one filled with memories of slow mornings and late-night laughter, now felt unfamiliar. Because when I opened the door, she was there, a woman, blonde, curled up on the couch in my sweatshirt, holding a mug from our kitchen. She barely looked up like she belonged there. And then Ethan walked out of the bedroom. Our bedroom. He did not even flinch when he saw me. No guilt, no shame, just a smirk that made my stomach turn. "This is my space now, Haley." His voice was too casual, like this was just another conversation. I felt the air leave my lungs. "What?" He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "I need a place of my own. You have the house, I have this." Like we were dividing things, not a life, not a marriage. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I would not cry. I would not beg. Instead, I smiled, turned around, and walked away. He thought he won. He had no idea what was coming. I met Ethan when I was 24, fresh into my career, and still figuring out adulthood. He was the kind of man people noticed. Charming, confident, the life of every room he walked into. When he looked at you, it felt like you were the only person in the world. And for a long time, I believed I was. We got married after 2 years of dating. It felt right, easy. I had no doubts when I walked down the aisle, no second thoughts when we said our vows. He held my hand so tightly, kissed me like he meant it, and promised forever. Forever is a funny thing. It starts as a promise, and sometimes ends as a lie. Our marriage was good, at least it looked that way. We worked hard, saved money, and built a comfortable life. We were partners in everything. We dreamed of traveling, buying a bigger house, maybe having kids one day. The vacation cabin came later, after a good year at work. It was our escape, a small place nestled in the woods, where the world felt quiet. We spent weekends there, just the two of us, cooking, drinking wine by the fireplace, talking for hours. I thought we were happy, but happiness can make you blind. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. It started small, missed calls, unanswered texts, little moments that did not add up. Ethan, who used to text me throughout the day, suddenly became too busy. His phone, which he once left on the kitchen counter without a second thought, was now always in his pocket, always on silent. When I asked about it, he laughed. "Work is just crazy right now." I believed him, because that is what you do when you love someone. You trust them. Then came the late nights. "I have to stay at the office," he said. More and more often. I would wake up at midnight, reaching for him, only to find the bed empty. The smell of his cologne on the pillow, but no warmth. And still, I convinced myself everything was fine, until it was not. Ethan, who once told me everything, started becoming a stranger. I would ask about his day, and he would give me short, clipped answers. "How was work?" "Same as always." I tried harder, planned date nights, cooked his favorite meals, dressed up just because. He would smile, thank me, but his eyes were somewhere else. I told myself it was just a rough patch. Every marriage has them, right? But deep down, something felt wrong. Then came the cabin. The first time Ethan went to the cabin alone, I did not question it. "I just need a break," he said. "Work is draining. I need some quiet." It made sense. The city was loud, stress was real. But then one weekend turned into 2, then 3. Every time I suggested coming with him, he had an excuse. "You would be bored. You have work. You do not even like the woods that much." It started to feel like he was pushing me away. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being insecure. Then one night, I called him. He did not answer. I tried again. Nothing. So I drove there. I arrived late, past midnight. The cabin lights were on. Ethan's car was parked outside. I stepped onto the porch, heart pounding. Something felt wrong. The moment I opened the door, I knew. There was a wine glass on the table, half full, a second coat hanging by the door. And the smell. Perfume, not mine. My chest tightened. My hands shook. I walked to the bedroom, barely breathing. The door was slightly open. And there he was. In bed with her. A woman. Blonde. Laughing at something he said. I did not scream. I did not cry. I just stood there, feeling my entire world shatter. The next morning, he came home, walked in like nothing happened. I stood in the kitchen, gripping a coffee mug so tightly I thought it might break. He kissed my cheek. Morning. Like he had not just spent the night with someone else. Like he had not destroyed everything. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I know. He paused, frowning. Know what? I met his eyes. The cabin. Her. For a second, I saw something flicker across his face. Not guilt, not regret, just annoyance. Then he sighed, like I was the problem. Haley, do not be dramatic. He ran a hand through his hair. It just happened, all right? I needed space. You get that, do you not? I stared at him. This was the man I married. This was the man I thought loved me. And all he could say was, do not be dramatic. I felt something in me snap. I nodded slowly. All right. He looked surprised. Maybe he expected me to cry, beg, scream. I did none of those things. I just smiled. And in that moment, I knew. He thought he won. But he had no idea what was coming. I did not cry. Not that night. Not the next morning. I went through the motions, woke up, went to work, smiled when necessary. If Ethan noticed anything different, he did not mention it. Maybe he thought I was in denial. Maybe he believed I would just accept it. That was his first mistake. Because while he carried on like nothing happened, I started digging. Ethan had always been careless with his phone when we were happy. But lately, he never left it unattended. He slept with it under his pillow, took it to the bathroom, kept it face down at all times. That only made me more determined. One night, after he fell asleep, I took a risk. He was a heavy sleeper, especially after a few drinks. I waited until his breathing slowed, then carefully reached under his pillow and pulled out his phone. Locked. I tried the usual, his birthday, our anniversary, even the code he used for our house alarm. Nothing. Then I remembered. A few weeks ago, I watched him type something in. 4 digits, his grandmother's birth year. I tried it, unlocked. My hands shook as I scrolled through his messages. And that was when I saw them. Dozens of texts. Not just to her. To multiple women. My stomach twisted as I read through the messages. It was not just some one-time mistake with the woman at the cabin. He had been doing this for years. Some messages were flirty. Others were explicit. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. A bank transfer. $5,000. Sent to a name I did not recognize. I quickly opened his banking app. There were several transactions, money moving in and out, payments to unknown accounts, withdrawals I never knew about. I checked our savings account, the one we built together, the one we planned to use for our future. Half of it was gone. I covered my mouth, my heart pounding. This was not just cheating. He was stealing from me. Everything started making sense. The expensive cologne, the sudden urge to hit the gym, the weekend trips to clear his head. I remembered a conversation from months ago. Ethan, should we start looking at investments? I had asked. Maybe put more into our savings? He had laughed. Relax, Haley. We have plenty of time for that. But he was not saving. He was spending, on her, on them. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. I would not break down, not yet. I needed a plan. The next morning, I acted normal. I made coffee, kissed Ethan's cheek, and watched as he lied to my face again. Got another work trip this weekend, he said, taking a sip of his coffee. Just a few days at the cabin. I nodded, pretending to believe him. Of course. Do you want me to pack anything for you? He smiled. No need. I have everything I need up there. I bet he did. He left for work, and I got to mine. I called our bank and asked for a detailed statement of all joint accounts. I played dumb, saying I wanted to check on a potential fraud charge. What I found confirmed everything. Ethan had been draining our savings for over a year. I printed everything, every transaction, every withdrawal, every transfer. Then I checked the house deed. It was in my name. I had almost forgotten. We bought it after I got a promotion, and for legal reasons, it was easier to put it under my name alone. The house was mine. But the cabin? That was both of ours. For now. That evening, I drove to the cabin while Ethan was still at work. I needed to see it with my own eyes. The moment I stepped inside, I knew this was not just his weekend getaway. There were women's clothes in the closet, perfume on the dresser, even a photo of them together, smiling in front of the fireplace Ethan and I had built together. My chest burned, but I forced myself to breathe. I was not going to fall apart. I took pictures of everything, proof, evidence. Then I placed one tiny camera in the corner of the bedroom, another in the kitchen. They were motion activated, sending footage straight to my phone. I wanted to see exactly what he was doing. That weekend, Ethan left for the work trip. I watched the live footage from my phone as he arrived at the cabin. She was with him. I listened as they laughed, as he kissed her in the kitchen, as they drank wine from the glasses I had bought. I saw him pull out his phone and transfer more money. To her, I clenched my fists. This was no accident, no moment of weakness. This was calculated betrayal, and I was done playing the fool. I spent the next week putting everything in place. First, I met with a lawyer. I showed her everything, the financial records, the affair, the proof of his deception. She smiled. You have enough to ruin him. That was the plan. Then, I quietly began separating our finances. I froze our joint accounts, moved my portion of the money into a new one under my name, and ensured he could not take another cent from me. Finally, I hired a private investigator. Not just for legal reasons, but to expose everything. Ethan thought he was smart. He had no idea who he was dealing with. The night before everything fell apart, Ethan came home like he always did. He kissed me, told me he loved me, and showered in the bathroom we once shared. I watched him, memorizing this moment. Because by this time tomorrow, his world would be burning, and I would be the one holding the match. I was never one for impulsive decisions. That was Ethan's flaw, not mine. He had been sloppy, leaving trails of money transfers, carelessly hiding his second life, believing I would never notice. He assumed I would break down, cry, beg him to stay. That was his second mistake. I was not going to scream. I was not going to throw things. I was going to destroy him piece by piece. The first step was securing myself financially. I had already moved my money into a new account, one he could not touch. But I needed more than just that. Ethan had drained our savings, used my name on expenses I never agreed to, and funneled money to a woman he thought he could keep. That was about to change. The day after my meeting with the lawyer, I sat down with a financial advisor. I wanted to make sure Ethan would be left with absolutely nothing. We combed through every account, every asset. The house was in my name, and after checking the details, I realized something even better. The mortgage was almost fully paid off with my income. That meant when I filed for divorce, there was no way he could claim it. The cabin was different. It was in both of our names. But I was prepared for that. With my lawyer's guidance, I drafted a legal motion to force the sale of the property. Ethan would be blindsided, unable to stop it. Whatever money came from it, I would make sure he never saw a dime. Once I had everything lined up, I took it a step further. I filed for a separate credit report on myself and checked for any loans or debts in my name. What I found made my blood boil. Ethan had taken out a personal loan using my credit. I did not react. I simply wrote down every detail, forwarded the information to my lawyer, and let her handle it. That debt was about to become Ethan's problem. Finances were one thing, but Ethan had done more than just steal money. He had built an entire web of lies, and I wanted everyone to see it. I started small. First, I sent an anonymous tip to his employer's HR department. Ethan worked for a company that had strict policies against financial misconduct and personal scandals that could impact their reputation. I attached proof of his shady transactions, highlighting how he had been funneling money into personal accounts and potentially committing fraud. I did not stop there. I compiled screenshots of his texts with other women, transactions, and explicit messages, then scheduled an email, one to every single one of his close friends, his family, and even a few professional contacts. Subject line: Ethan is not who you think he is. I scheduled it for a week later. Just enough time for everything else to start falling apart first. With the financial destruction underway, I moved on to the divorce. I did not tell Ethan. I let him believe everything was fine. I had dinner ready when he got home, acted normal, let him lie to my face every single day. He would text her at the table, smirk when he thought I was not looking, and leave on the weekends like he was getting away with everything. Meanwhile, my lawyer was preparing the divorce papers with a full lawsuit attached. Since Ethan had used our joint money for his affairs, I had legal grounds to demand compensation. Not only would he lose his share of the house sale, but he would also owe me a substantial amount in damages. The best part? He would not even see it coming. A week before the email blast was scheduled, I decided to pay a visit to the cabin one last time. Not to see him. To make sure they were comfortable. I drove up on a Saturday morning, knowing Ethan was there with her. I did not make a scene. I did not even go inside. I simply parked my car outside the driveway, just long enough for the motion sensor cameras to capture my presence. I wanted them to wonder. I wanted him to panic. Sure enough, that night, Ethan asked, "Did you go up to the cabin today?" I blinked, feigning confusion. "No, why?" He hesitated. "Just thought I saw your car on the cameras." I tilted my head. "Maybe there is an issue with the cameras?" His face paled slightly. I could see the thoughts racing in his head. Good. Let him feel what it is like to not trust the person next to you. The real hit came the next morning. Ethan woke up to find his credit card declined at the gas station, then again at the grocery store. By the time he got home, he was furious. "Something is wrong with my accounts," he muttered, pulling out his laptop. I sipped my coffee. "Oh?" He clicked through screens, his frustration growing. His accounts were frozen. Our joint ones were closed. His personal savings? Drained by the debts he had created in my name. He was spiraling. He had no idea it was just the beginning. I waited until the night before the scheduled email blast to strike again. While Ethan was asleep, I quietly packed a bag. Just a small one, enough to make it seem like I was leaving for work in the morning. Except this time, I was not coming back. At exactly 7 a.m., I walked out the door with my suitcase. I did not leave a note. I did not text him. I did not say goodbye. At 8 a.m., the email went out. By the time Ethan checked his phone, his world was already crumbling. I knew the exact moment the email went out. At 8:07 a.m., my phone started vibrating nonstop. Not from Ethan, I had already blocked his number, but from mutual friends, coworkers, even his sister. The damage was instant. By the time Ethan even opened his eyes, his reputation was already in shambles. He had no idea what had hit him. The emails spread like wildfire. Every single lie he had ever told, every betrayal, every stolen dollar, exposed. His employer, furious. His family, humiliated. His friends, disgusted. Ethan had always thrived on control, on maintaining the illusion of a perfect life. Now he was the center of a scandal he could not escape. By noon, he had been called into an emergency meeting at work. HR had received my anonymous tip, and with the attached financial evidence, they had no choice but to launch an internal investigation. By the time he stepped out of that meeting, his access card had already been deactivated. He was suspended, without pay. Ethan tried to call me. Blocked. He tried to email me. Deleted without reading. He even reached out to mutual friends, hoping someone would convince me to talk to him. It was too late. By the evening, he drove to my office, furious and desperate. But the moment he stepped into the lobby, security stopped him. I had already given them instructions. He was not allowed near me. I watched from my office window as he argued with them, his face twisted in frustration. The reality was sinking in. He was powerless. And then she showed up. The woman he had left me for, Mia, stormed into the building right after him. She was livid. Her voice carried through the lobby, full of accusations. "You told me she did not matter," she screamed. Ethan tried to calm her down, but she was having none of it. She waved her phone in his face, showing him the emails, the bank statements, the proof that he was just as much a liar to her as he had been to me. And then came the best part. "I lost my apartment because of you, Ethan. I have nothing left. What am I supposed to do now?" My smile was cold as I watched security escort them both out. Let them deal with each other. I could have stopped there, but I wanted to make sure Ethan never recovered from this. With my lawyer's help, I filed an official lawsuit for financial fraud and emotional damages. Ethan would not only lose whatever savings he had left, he would owe me for years. He tried to fight it, but the evidence was airtight. His bank accounts were frozen, his job was gone, and his so-called mistress? She had already moved on. His lawyer called mine, begging for a settlement. But I was not feeling generous. "You should have thought about this before," I told my lawyer to respond. Within 6 months, Ethan was bankrupt. Within a year, he was living in a rundown apartment, struggling to find work, abandoned by the very people he once manipulated. His family stopped speaking to him. His mother, the one who had always adored him, refused to even take his calls. His sister, who had once believed he was a good man, publicly called him out for his lies. His friends? They had all distanced themselves. No one wanted to be associated with a fraud. He tried to rebuild, but every job he applied for already knew his story. His scandal was public, his downfall permanent. Mia? She had moved in with someone else, someone with money. She had never loved Ethan. He was just her escape plan. Now he was nothing to her. The last time I saw Ethan, it was purely by accident. I was leaving a restaurant, laughing with friends, when I saw him across the street. He looked broken. He saw me too. For a moment, our eyes met. There was no hatred, no rage, just defeat. He had finally learned what it felt like to be discarded, to be treated as an afterthought, and that was enough. I turned away, stepping into the car. As we drove off, I did not look back. Ethan was just a lesson learned, a mistake in my past, and I had already won. Ethan had already lost almost everything, his job, his money, his reputation. But fate was not done with him yet. I made sure of that. The financial fraud lawsuit had not just drained his savings, it had left him with a 6-figure debt. He was barely scraping by, picking up whatever odd jobs he could, but nothing was enough. His credit was ruined. His once polished life was now a mess of overdue bills and eviction notices. One day, my lawyer called with an update that made my day. Ethan had failed to make his court-ordered payments, and because of that, legal action was moving forward. His wages, what little he was making, would be garnished. His only car, the last thing of value he had left, would soon be repossessed. He had no way out. I did not feel sorry for him. He had built this trap himself. I had just closed the door. The most ironic part? Ethan had always been obsessed with status. He loved being the man who had everything: money, influence, the admiration of others. Now, he was the example people used when they warned about greed and betrayal. His old coworkers whispered about him in the hallways. Some of them even forwarded job rejection emails they had received about him. Companies did not even want to interview him. His name was a red flag. Even his family had turned their backs on him. His mother had tried to help at first, but when she realized how deep his lies had gone, she had cut him off completely. His sister, who had once adored him, blocked his number. The final humiliation came when his landlord evicted him. He had nowhere to go. He had to move into a cramped, run-down studio in the worst part of town, barely able to afford food. The man who once laughed at others' misfortunes was now living in misery himself. And Mia? She had moved on the moment the money dried up. She was already with someone else, pretending Ethan had never existed. Karma had done its job well. As for me, my life had never been better. The divorce had been the best thing that ever happened to me. I had learned my worth, taken control of my finances, and found real happiness. I had poured my energy into my work, and my career was thriving. I had more freedom, more confidence, and peace. I traveled. I went on spontaneous trips, met incredible people, and rebuilt myself from the ground up. My laughter was real again. My smiles were not forced. I was no longer looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next betrayal. And love? I had not been looking for it, but somehow it found me. Someone kind, honest, and steady entered my life. Someone who treated me with the respect I had never gotten from Ethan. It was not rushed. It was not desperate. It was real. One day, I was sitting at a cafe with him, enjoying a warm afternoon, when I saw someone familiar out of the corner of my eye. Ethan. He looked different. The arrogance was gone. His clothes were cheap, his posture slumped, his eyes hollow. He was working as a delivery driver. He was dropping off a food order at one of the tables when he saw me. His entire body stiffened. For a second, it looked like he wanted to run. Then, as if realizing there was nowhere left to hide, he walked toward me. I did not move. I did not flinch. I simply sipped my coffee, waiting. When he stopped at my table, he looked down, his voice hesitant. I was hoping we could talk. I raised an eyebrow. About what? His jaw tightened. About everything. I made mistakes, I know that. But I am not the same person anymore. I need a second chance. A second chance. The words were almost laughable. I set my coffee down and met his gaze, completely unmoved. I gave you chances, Ethan. You burned them all. His shoulders slumped. I lost everything, he admitted. I lost my job, my money. My family does not even talk to me anymore. He swallowed hard, his voice quieter. I lost you. I tilted my head. That is the only thing you regret, is it not? Losing me, not because you loved me, but because I was your safety net. His silence was answer enough. I picked up my purse and stood up. The man sitting across from me, the man who had replaced Ethan in my life, stood up as well, his presence steady, unwavering. Ethan looked between us, realization dawning in his eyes. I was happy, I was free, and he was nothing but a memory. I gave him one last look, not with anger, not with hatred, just indifference. Then I walked away, and I never looked back.